So today I'm going to share an easy dessert with you, fruit cocktail cake. I learned how to make this from my mother-in-law, Miss Cindy. She learned how to make it from her sister many years ago. It's been years now since I learned how to make it too. But Miss Cindy said her sister, she thought picked up the recipe and learned to make it when she lived in Oklahoma. Well, of course, Oklahoma's not Appalachia, but then that recipe come back here to Miss Cindy and probably to other people in their community, and then they began to make it, and other people have made it. I'm by no means saying they're the only ones, but I do think it's an interesting point. One time years ago when I was talking about Appalachian Foodways, and someone said, well, every time I get a Appalachian cookbook, it'll have banana pudding in it. And I always think, well, that's not Appalachian. How could that be? Because bananas are not grown in Appalachia. And I kind of smiled and I said, well, you don't, to look at it that way, you'd have to think that Appalachians never went nowhere and that nobody never visited them, and that they're slightly dumb, because of course none of those are true. But when you go somewhere, it only makes sense. Whoever the first person that went somewhere and tasted a banana and then tasted a banana pudding, why wouldn't they bring it home and then make it part of their everyday meals? It's like we don't live in this bubble where nothing can come in and nothing can come out. So I love that example of banana pudding, because it is almost synonymous with any kind of church function you have. A lot of times family reunions and all that. A lot of restaurants in Appalachia serve banana pudding. It is like one of the most common desserts. And it's really tasty. But as that person pointed out to me, bananas are not grown in Appalachia. But that's still, it goes back to some kind of that stereotype of that everything has to remain in that bubble of Appalachia, that nothing can come in or nothing can go out, and that's just not true. Just like it's not true for any other part of the world. I might visit a different country, and if I find a recipe that I like using the fruit that is native to that area, once I come back home, if I can find it at my local grocery store, why wouldn't I continue to make it? It's that way with food, with music, and it's the opposite way too. A lot of people move to the Appalachian Mountains and maybe they learn some foodways or some language. I love to talk about language. They learn some new words or some new funny sayings or a colorful way of saying something, and then they go back to Washington State. They go back overseas. They go back to wherever they come from, and they take that language with them. That's just a wonderful, beautiful thing. So anyway, that's my thoughts about the fruit cocktail cake that Miss Cindy made for so many years and then taught me, although her sister learned to make it in Oklahoma when she lived there. So fruit cocktail cake is one of those easy recipes that you can just whip together pretty quickly. Of course, it takes, all recipes take a certain amount of time, but it's an easy cake to make when you compare it to maybe a cake that you have to frost with a lot of layers, those kind of things. It's really easy. Several years ago, when I wrote about it for the first time on the Blind Pig and the Acorn, a lot of people remembered it, their grandmother or their mother making it, and a lot of people had it tied to church socials or church suppers. And when I think about it, it is one of those cakes that fit perfectly with whether it's a potluck, but for me, since I was thinking about those comments, a church meal, whatever kind of meal you're having at church. Maybe your church has once a month has a Sunday night supper, or maybe it's homecoming, or maybe it's decoration, because this is a really fairly quick cake to whip up, but then it's also easy to transport. It's not one that you have to worry about the layers moving or worry about it being refrigerated or any of those kind of things. So that makes it an ideal cake to actually make and take with you somewhere, whether it's church or to a potluck or to a different thing. But now I'm going to show you how to make it. Well, first I'm going to start with the ingredients and kind of go over it. And I will put, as always, the link down below in the description so that you can go to the actual recipe and for more detail, or to copy it down, or whatever you want. So it's kind of two parts to this recipe. There's the cake part, and then there's the sauce part that goes on top. So for the cake, it takes 1/2 cup of sugar, 2 eggs, 2 cups of plain flour or all-purpose flour, 2 teaspoons of baking soda, and 1 can of fruit cocktail, hence the name of the cake. And the fruit cocktail, when Paul and I were little, and Granny would fix fruit cocktail for us, like for a snack or to go along with maybe a sandwich or something, she would just open a can, is what she would do. Paul liked to call it fruit cottontail. That's what he called it. So he always wanted some fruit cottontail. So when I think about fruit cocktail, I actually in my mind think fruit cottontail. So, but with the can, it's a 15-ounce can that you'll need, and you're going to drain it, but you're going to reserve that liquid, so you're actually going to use all of it. And then for the sauce, once the cake is made, it's going to take 1 1/2 cups sugar, a stick of butter, a teaspoon of vanilla, and 1 large can of evaporated milk. That's like 12 ounces. I don't have a large one today, so I'll be using 2 of the small ones. 1 cup of pecans and 1 cup of coconut, and that will make the sauce. So now that I've told you about the cake, I'm going to show you how to put it all together. So first we're going to cream the sugar and the eggs. That lovely color. Now we're going to add the baking soda and the plain flour, or all-purpose flour, and we're going to mix that. Once that's mixed in, you can see how dry it is. We're going to add, we drained the fruit cocktail, and this is the liquid, so we're going to add the liquid to the cake now, or to the batter. And we're going to let this mix for 4 minutes. Actually, I'm going to, gosh, it don't look pretty.
That's beautiful. Who's gonna get to lick that?
I guess you, if you want.
Oh, uh-oh. I am the lucky recipient.
So now we've let our batter mix for 4 minutes. Now we're done with that, and we're going to actually fold in our drained fruit cocktail. When you were little, or maybe you still eat fruit cocktail somehow, I guess because when me and Paul were little, like I told you the fruit cottontail story, always reminds me of being little. But I had my favorites. I always thought about which fruit was my favorite, and the grapes were my favorite. I didn't like the cherries. The peaches were okay, but the grapes were my favorite. Anyway, we're going to fold that in. So now that we've got the fruit cocktail folded in, now we're going to put it in our pan. I'm using a 13x9 pan. You need to preheat your oven to 325. I don't think I mentioned that, so that's what we're going to bake it at for an hour, actually, is what the recipe says. Now you need to keep a check on it and make sure, because your oven may cook faster than that or even slower than that. But you don't have to grease the pan. And Miss Cindy told me that was one of the reasons, 2 reasons that she liked the cake so much after she learned how to make it, was that it was tasty, it tasted really great, and that you didn't have to grease the pan. So there's no need to worry about greasing the pan. So now we're going to add our batter, and then we'll be ready to bake it. So the sauce or the icing for the cake couldn't be easier. You add all the ingredients into a pan, you bring them to a boil, allow it to boil for 5 minutes, and then you pour it onto the hot cake. So we've got our butter in. I'm going to add the sugar next, the vanilla. I didn't have a large can of cream, so I'm using 2 small ones. So we're going to add that. Seems like a lot of old recipes called for evaporated milk or cream. I'm going to add the pecans and the coconut. So now we have the icing boiled for 5 minutes, and we're going to put it on the cake. First, you cut the cake, go ahead and cut it into squares. That allows that wonderful sauce to actually really seep down inside all those little cracks. So you can kind of make sure that it's around all the edges, and then you're supposed to wait at least 2 hours, but even longer than that, to allow all that goodness to really soak down in there. This is one of those cakes I can never wait. I'm going to wait a few hours, but I can never wait usually. I just get me some out and try it. But this is one of those cakes that it's really better the next day, the following day, because all that has time to sink down into the cake. And another good thing about taking it to a church meal or a church social, potluck, or a decoration day homecoming is you can make it the day before and allow all that goodness just to soak in there, and then on the morning or the evening or the night when you're hurrying out, it's already made. So we have not waited 2 hours. We might have waited an hour, but we got to try the cake. So we want to taste of it. So I'm going to cut us a piece out. I've already made those cuts, so it should be fairly easy to get a piece out. Maybe. Okay. So you can see how moist it is, and it's not even, like I said, been long enough for it to all soak in like you're supposed to wait. You're supposed to wait for several hours, but who can wait that long? I like to eat cake when it's warm anyway. So good. How could it not be with that much sugar, right? It's really a moist cake with the fruit and then pouring the icing over it. So you can see it's really moist even though we hadn't waited the allotted time. You can see why so many people have such great memories about their grandmother or their mother or just a lady at church making this cake in days gone by. Several people told me this was like their special holiday. So at Thanksgiving they always had fruit cocktail cake, different things like that, different special holidays or a special occasion. This was like their go-to cake for those things because it really is special. But I like it because it's easy to make and it's so good. So I hope you'll leave a comment and tell me, have you ever had fruit cocktail cake? If so, what memories did you have about it? Would you like to share those with us? But mostly, as always, I just hope you'll keep dropping back by as we celebrate Appalachia.